Tonight we enter the low, moonlit plains of ancient southern Mesopotamia, where the first known cities rise from mud, reeds, heat, and patient human hands. In 1929, archaeologists excavating at Uruk uncovered thousands of clay tablets, many of them marked with signs so old they seemed less like writing than the memory of writing being born. Scholars at the British Museum, the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, and later researchers at Oxford have studied these tablets as some of the earliest surviving evidence for written communication anywhere on Earth. And there, in the dust of what is now southern Iraq, one question still breathes softly through the broken clay. Who first taught human thought to survive the human voice? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you are listening from, and what time it is where you are. Perhaps it is late. Perhaps your room is quiet. Perhaps outside your window the modern world is still pretending it is awake. You let your mind drift backward more than 5,000 years, beyond paper, beyond ink, beyond alphabets, beyond the clean black letters resting on screens. You arrive in a place where the land is flat and shining under the sun, where rivers spread into marshes, and where the soil is dark with silt. The air smells of wet clay, date palms, animal breath, and smoke from small hearths. Sandals press softly into packed earth. Reed boats move through brown water. Somewhere a donkey complains with comic seriousness, as if civilization itself has offended him. Here, people do not yet write stories in the way you know them. They do not compose letters to distant friends or record the private moods of the heart. Not at first. The earliest marks are humbler than that, and maybe more unsettling. They count, they list, they remember debt, grain, wool, jars of oil, sheep, beer, labor, and offerings. It is not poetry yet. It is bureaucracy, which is less romantic, but far more difficult to escape. Records from excavations at Uruk confirm that many early tablets were administrative, used to track goods in a growing urban economy. Researchers from major universities have often emphasized that writing did not begin as a sudden miracle of literature. It emerged from practical pressure, from the need to manage things too numerous for memory alone. That is the mainstream fact beneath the mystery. Writing begins not with kings dreaming of immortality, but with accountants staring at piles of grain. Still, there is something strange about that, because once a mark is pressed into clay, it no longer belongs entirely to the hand that made it. It waits, it hardens, it becomes patient in a way no spoken word can be patient. The voice disappears into air, but the sign remains under dust, under collapsed walls, under the sleep of centuries. You can almost feel the first scribe pausing, not yet knowing that a small wedge in clay might one day become a doorway. The city around you is Uruk, one of the great early urban centers of Sumer. Its temples rise on platforms of mud brick, pale and massive beneath the sky. Workers carry baskets, priests supervise offerings. Traders arrive with goods from far places, bringing stone, timber, metals, and stories no one can easily verify. The city murmurs with movement. Nothing is simple anymore. A village can remember itself through faces and gossip. A city needs something colder, quieter, and harder to fool. So the clay receives marks. You imagine a tablet resting in the palm, damp and soft, still smelling of river mud. A reed stylus presses into it with a small, final motion. The mark is not decorative. It has a job. It says something like 10 jars, or 20 sheep, or so much grain delivered to such a place. The signs are drawn and impressed, sometimes pictorial, sometimes already becoming abstract. They are neither fully pictures nor fully words. They exist in between, like creatures crossing a river at dawn. One quirky tidbit survives in the scholarly imagination around these early systems. Some of the first signs may have grown from clay tokens, small-shaped counters used for accounting long before true writing appeared. A cone might stand for one measure of grain. A sphere might stand for another kind of good. Tiny objects became signs, and signs became tablets. In a sense, writing may have begun as a bag of little clay things. Humanity's first great intellectual revolution might have sounded like pebbles clicking together in someone's hand. There is a gentle absurdity in that. Before philosophy, before royal hymns, before epics and laws, there may have been a worried official trying not to lose count of sheep. You can almost see him, tired, dusty, and suspicious of everyone. He is not trying to invent history. He is trying to survive inventory. But history often enters through side doors. The open scholarly debate remains delicate and unresolved. Researchers still discuss whether writing in Sumer developed independently, whether it was influenced by older accounting traditions, and how closely its emergence should be compared with early writing in Egypt. Some scholars argue for a largely independent birth in Mesopotamia, while others see a broader world of exchange and experimentation. The evidence is ancient, broken, and stubborn. It does not answer quickly. That is why the mystery endures. You stand now at the edge of a temple courtyard as evening lowers over the city. The heat loosens its grip. Dust glows in the last light. Somewhere nearby, reeds hiss in the marsh wind, and a line of workers brings grain toward a storehouse. A scribe waits with clay. His hands are practiced, perhaps stained, perhaps cracked from work. He does not think of himself as the inventor of civilization. He does not imagine museums, universities, glass cases, or quiet people leaning over his tablet thousands of years later. He only presses the sign. Yet in that pressure, something changes. Human memory separates from the body. It no longer needs a living mouth. It no longer depends on one elder sitting near a fire, or one priest reciting what must not be forgotten. The sign can travel. The sign can accuse. The sign can command. The sign can outlive the person who made it. That may be the hidden truth at the heart of early writing. It is not merely a tool. It is a new kind of presence. A dead hand can still speak. A vanished city can still keep accounts. A forgotten official can still tell you how many goats passed into a temple storehouse on a day when the river smelled of mud and the sky burned white. You may think that sounds small. Goats, grain, beer, wool. But small things are how civilization reveals its bones. A king's monument tells you what power wanted remembered. An account tablet tells you what life required every morning. Someone had to bake bread. Someone had to measure rations. Someone had to move animals, seal jars, count laborers, and decide who received what. Writing began close to hunger, work, and trust, or perhaps mistrust, because a written record suggests that memory was no longer enough. Spoken promises had become too fragile. Goods moved through too many hands. Authority stretched across too much space. The city had outgrown the old comfort of simply knowing everyone. Clay became the witness. Clay became the quiet judge. For a moment, it feels almost unsettling. In creating writing, the Sumerians did not only preserve thought, they created distance between people and their own words. A mark could be checked. A record could be stored. A command could remain after the commander had left the room. The soft tablet, once dried, became firmer than denial. Night gathers over Uruk. The temple walls darken. The river continues its slow passage through the plain, indifferent and ancient. Above, the stars appear with the same cold patience they had before the first city, before the first account, before the first anxious hand pressed meaning into mud. You hear insects, distant footsteps, and the faint scrape of reed against clay. Perhaps this is where writing truly begins, not in triumph, but in unease. A city becomes too large to remember itself. A temple becomes too wealthy to trust memory alone. A people living between flood, harvest, hunger, and ambition discover that thought can be trapped in earth. And the earth, unlike breath, does not forget easily. Your mind drifts into an older silence, where writing has not yet fully opened its eyes. There are no tablets covered in rows of signs. There are no scribal schools humming with careful recitation. There are only hands, objects, memory, and the nervous need to keep count. The world is still wide and physical. Meaning sits inside things you can touch. You find yourself near a settlement where the air smells of straw, smoke, and damp earth. The morning is pale. Goats shift behind a low fence. A woman lifts a basket with slow strength. A man kneels beside a small collection of clay shapes, each one simple, each one strangely important. Cones, spheres, discs, little pieces of earth, dried hard enough to survive handling. They look almost like toys or offerings or fragments from some forgotten game. But they are not toys. They are memory made portable. Long before writing becomes lines on clay, people across the ancient Near East used tokens to count goods. Archaeological studies from institutions such as the University of Chicago and Yale have helped shape the mainstream view that these tokens formed part of a deep accounting tradition. Each small shape may represent a type or amount of commodity. One token might stand for grain, another might stand for livestock, another might belong to oil, textiles, or labor. The exact system changes across time and place, but the principle is simple. A thing stands for another thing. That sounds ordinary now. It was not ordinary then. To you, numbers live quietly inside written symbols. 10 is just 10. A sheep can become a word, a mark, a statistic, a joke on a farm receipt. But in this early world, number and object remain closely tied together. Counting is tactile. Accounting has weight. If a herd moves, the record may move as small clay counters inside a container. You do not just read the account, you hold it. There is a softness in this stage of human thought, even though the objects are hard. The mind is learning to step away from the immediate world, but not too far. A token is still a body. It occupies space. It can be dropped, stolen, hidden, sealed, or found under a floor by a puzzled archaeologist many thousands of years later. Imagine that poor little token, waiting patiently like a pebble with a job. The quirky detail is almost charming. Some clay tokens were sealed inside hollow clay envelopes, round containers known to modern scholars as bullae. The outside could be marked or impressed to show what was hidden inside. So, in a practical and faintly comic way, people created an ancient clay receipt with the receipt locked inside the receipt. Humanity has always enjoyed making paperwork more complicated than necessary. Yet this complication matters. When a sealed clay envelope holds tokens, trust begins to change. The contents are protected. The seal identifies authority. The marks outside give a visible summary. Now a person does not need to open the container each time to know what it contains. The outside begins to speak for the inside. A sign begins to replace the thing itself. That step feels small, but it is enormous. You can imagine an official pressing a token against the wet surface of clay. The token leaves an imprint. Suddenly, the shape itself may no longer be needed. Why carry the small object if its impression can remain? Why hide counters inside a clay shell if marks on the surface can show the same information more clearly? The hand hesitates. The mind follows. The world tilts. A mark can stand for a token. A token can stand for grain. Grain can stand for labor, hunger, wealth, obligation, temple power, and survival. In that chain, writing is waiting, not fully born, but waiting. The settlement around you breathes with ordinary effort. Children chase each other near reed fencing. Someone laughs over a spilled measure of grain. Someone else probably does not laugh, because grain is never merely grain. A storage room smells of dust and barley. A clay seal hangs from a cord. The river lies beyond the fields, brown and indifferent, carrying silt, fish, reeds, and rumors from places upstream. You notice the rhythm of life, planting, harvesting, counting, storing, redistributing. Each cycle depends on memory, and memory depends on people. But people forget, people die, people disagree. People say, with stunning confidence, that they delivered 6 jars when they absolutely delivered 4. This is why civilization needs records. Not because humans are wicked in some grand theatrical way, but because humans are human. The scholarly debate here remains quietly active. Some researchers argue that token systems were direct ancestors of writing, a long bridge from object counting to impressed signs. Others warn that the relationship may not be so neat, because early recording practices varied widely and evidence survives unevenly. Oxford-trained Assyriologists and archaeologists have often treated the transition as gradual, not a single invention by one brilliant mind. The clay does not preserve every experiment. It preserves what happened to survive. This makes the beginning feel misty. You are not watching a lone genius wake one morning and invent writing over breakfast. You are watching centuries of problem-solving, repeated in storerooms, courtyards, workshops, and administrative corners. People mark containers. People seal doors. People press signs into clay. People compare one method with another. Many failures vanish. A few habits endure. Eventually, a system begins to gather itself. That is how many human revolutions happen, not as thunder, as habit. The sun climbs higher, and heat begins to press upon the settlement. A worker wipes sweat from his brow. A reed mat creaks under someone's foot. The smell of warm clay thickens. On a low bench, a cluster of tokens lies beside a lump of wet earth. The scene is humble, almost dull, yet it carries a hidden force. Every token is an argument against forgetting. You begin to sense that early writing did not simply appear from art or speech. It rose from relationships. Someone owed something. Someone delivered something. Someone promised something. Someone needed proof. In these small tensions, society stretched beyond face-to-face memory. The old world of direct presence began to loosen. That loosening can feel slightly unsettling. A spoken agreement lives inside the bodies of those who hear it. A token lives outside them. A sealed envelope lives even farther away. A mark on the envelope goes farther still, becoming visible to someone who never witnessed the original exchange. Meaning travels without the event. Evidence separates from experience. That is the first ghost of writing. You sit in the late afternoon shade as flies gather near a jar of dates nearby. An elder turns a clay counter between finger and thumb. It is no larger than a seed, yet it belongs to a future of libraries, law codes, sacred stories, royal boasting, school punishments, love songs, and tax records. Especially tax records, because paradise is apparently never allowed to exist without administration. The token does not know this. The hand does not know this. The people around you do not know they are standing near one of the great thresholds of human memory. They are simply solving the problem of keeping track. Still, when the token presses into clay, it leaves more than a dent. It leaves the idea that absence can be managed. A sheep need not stand before you. A jar need not sit at your feet. A person need not be present to be remembered, counted, claimed, or questioned. The first signs are sleeping inside these shapes. As evening lowers, Vacuum, the settlement grows quieter. Smoke rises blue from hearths. Animals settle into their pens. The clay objects rest in a small pile, plain and almost invisible. Yet around them, a new kind of world is forming, one where memory can be stored outside the mind, one where trust becomes sealed, one where meaning begins its long, strange journey from the hand into the mark. Perhaps writing begins not when people invent words on clay, but when they first decide that memory needs a body. For a moment, it feels as though the ground itself grows crowded. You are no longer standing among small exchanges and quiet counters. You are entering Uruk at its restless height, when the city swells beyond the older shape of human life. Mud brick walls rise in the heat. Alleys twist between houses. Courtyards hold jars, baskets, tools, animals, and arguments. The air carries the scent of barley bread, bitumen, sweat, reeds, and river mud warmed by the sun. This is not merely a settlement. This is a machine of people. Uruk becomes one of the earliest great cities known to archaeology, spreading across a vast area in the 4th millennium before the Common Era. Excavations by German teams, later studied by scholars at institutions such as the University of Chicago, Oxford, and other major research centers, confirm that Uruk held monumental buildings, complex craft production, large-scale storage, and dense administrative activity. The mainstream fact is clear. Writing appears here because the city has become too large, too busy, and too layered for spoken memory alone. You walk slowly through a district where workers carry loads on their backs. Their shoulders shine with sweat. A supervisor watches with the careful expression of a person who believes everyone else is moving too slowly. Somewhere, a potter turns clay vessels in steady rhythm. Somewhere else, wool is cleaned. spun, weighed, and passed onward. Nothing stays still for long. Goods move from field to storehouse, from storehouse to workshop, from workshop to temple, from temple to table, and sometimes, one suspects, into someone's private corner. The city needs memory because the city is hungry. It needs grain for workers. It needs beer for rations. It needs wool for textiles. It needs clay for vessels and tablets. It needs wood. Although the southern plain has little timber, it needs stone. Although stone must come from distant lands, it needs people who know where things are, who received them, who sent them, and who has been conveniently forgetting the details. This is where writing becomes useful in a new way, not as a sacred secret at first, although sacred buildings surround it, not as literature at first, although literature will come. It becomes a practical net thrown across the moving body of the city. Every basket, jar, animal, field, worker, and delivery threatens to vanish into confusion unless something holds the pattern together. The tablet does not sleep. You stand near a great administrative building where the floor is packed hard by many feet. A reed mat lies beside a doorway. The interior is cooler, though not exactly comfortable. Clay tablets rest on shelves or in baskets, some still damp, some drying, some perhaps discarded because a line was wrong or a figure did not agree. A scribe sits with a stylus. His work is careful, but not glamorous. Civilization is often less glamorous up close. It smells like damp clay and tired knees. A quirky tradition from later Mesopotamian scribal culture hints that scribes could be both respected and teased. School texts preserve the image of students struggling with lessons, being corrected by teachers, and worrying over their performance. The distant ancestor of homework may have lived beside these early administrative habits. This is comforting, in a mildly cruel way. Even at the dawn of writing, someone was probably being told their signs were untidy. Yet the city depends on those untidy signs becoming orderly. You watch a delivery arrive. Men unload sacks of grain from a boat pulled through canals from cultivated land beyond the city edge. The sacks are heavy, rough, and dusty. A measured portion must be entered. Another portion must be stored. A share may be set aside for temple personnel, labor gangs, craftsmen, or future offerings. Each movement creates a question. How much came in? Where did it go? Who authorized it? Who will complain later? The tablet answers before the complaint arrives. There is an open scholarly debate about how centralized Uruk truly was, and how much power belonged to temples, households, officials, or emerging elites. Researchers from leading universities do not all picture the same city. Some see powerful institutions coordinating labor and goods on a scale previously unknown. Others emphasize a more varied urban landscape, where different groups managed production and exchange. The debate remains alive because mud brick ruins rarely confess their politics. Still, the tablets speak in patterns. They reveal an obsession with categories. Sheep are not simply sheep. Grain is not simply grain. Workers are counted. Rations are assigned. Containers are measured. Offices appear. Institutions leave traces. The city begins to classify itself, and classification is never neutral. Once something has a category, it can be managed. Once someone is entered into a record, they are easier to command. That thought settles quietly. You move through the street again, feeling the rough wall brush your fingers. The sun turns white above the roofs. Children crouch in shade, drawing lines in dust with sticks. A dog sleeps in complete confidence near a doorway, proving that at least one creature in Uruk has mastered civilization. Above the city, temple platforms rise like artificial hills, built by labor, belief, and authority. The gods are imagined high, but the storerooms are very much on earth. The city's memory is not only about goods, it is about hierarchy. A person who controls records controls what is owed, what is owned, and what can be proven. A spoken claim may fade under pressure. A tablet can be held up. A seal impression can identify a responsible party. A list can create order, but order always has an edge. This is why writing is both beautiful and slightly troubling. You may imagine the first written systems as pure enlightenment, a lamp raised against darkness. There is truth in that. Writing allows memory to travel beyond flesh, yet it also allows institutions to reach farther than a human voice. It lets power become patient. It lets command sit in storage until needed. It lets the city remember you, even when you would rather be forgotten. A field worker may never touch the stylus, yet the stylus may touch his life. His ration can be marked. His labor can be counted. His absence can be noticed. His name, or at least his assigned place in the system, can become part of administrative memory. That is a strange bargain. Writing preserves life, but it also measures it. The heat begins to soften toward evening. Shadows gather in alleys. The city exhales. You hear the creak of a cart, the slap of sandals, the low call of someone closing a gate. Near a storage room, a tablet is set aside to dry. Its surface holds marks that mean goods have passed, workers have labored, and authority has taken notice. No one sings over it. No one weeps over it. It is ordinary. Yet ordinary things endure. You begin to feel that Uruk invents writing because Uruk invents a new kind of forgetting. In a village, memory lives in faces. In a city, faces blur. Trade expands. Labor divides. Officials multiply. Promises move across distance. The old human mind, warm and social and unreliable, can no longer hold everything together. Clay steps in. The city that needs memory creates memory outside itself. Night settles over the plain, and the river darkens beneath the first stars. The buildings become shapes against the sky. Somewhere inside the quiet storehouses, small tablets wait in rows, hardening into permanence. They do not know they belong to a turning point. They do not know that countless voices will vanish while their marks remain. And perhaps that is the first great secret of the city. It does not remember everything because it is wise. It remembers because it cannot survive without records. The invention feels practical, almost dull, but beneath it lies a deeper change. Human society has become too vast for human memory alone, and so thought begins learning to live in clay. In your ears, the city noise narrows into a smaller sound, the faint scrape of reed against wet clay. You are close now to the actual moment of making, close enough to see the pressure of a thumb at the tablet's edge. The room is dimmer than the courtyard outside. Light enters through a doorway and falls across a low working surface, where lumps of clay wait like unfinished thoughts. The clay is not glamorous. It is cool, heavy, and patient. It has been gathered from riverbanks, kneaded with water, cleaned of grit as much as anyone has time to bother. then shaped into a small tablet. Some tablets fit easily into the palm. Others are larger, meant for more complicated records. Their surfaces are smoothed by hand, but never perfectly. You might see a fingerprint near the corner, a tiny ridge, a human accident surviving longer than empires. The tool is a reed stylus, cut from the plants that grow in the marshes and along canals. Early signs at Uruk were often drawn or impressed into clay, and over time the angled end of the reed produced the wedge-shaped marks later known as cuneiform. Research from universities such as Pennsylvania, Chicago, and Oxford has shown that this material pairing mattered deeply. Clay and reed did not merely receive writing. They shaped how writing looked. This is the mainstream fact that changes the scene. Writing is not only an idea, it is also a technology of hand, tool, surface, moisture, speed, and storage. The Sumerians did not write as you do, moving ink across a dry page. They pressed meaning downward into earth. Every sign is a small event of force. You watch the scribe prepare the tablet with a practiced calm. He does not need beauty in the modern sense. He needs clarity. The tablet must record what it is meant to record, and it must survive long enough to be checked. Damp clay allows correction, which is helpful, because human beings were making mistakes long before anyone invented office printers. A sign can be smoothed away if the clay is still soft. Once dried, however, the tablet becomes more stubborn. Once fired by accident or intention, it becomes almost unnervingly durable. There is a strange intimacy in this process. The hand presses. The clay yields. The mark remains. You lean closer and notice that each motion has a rhythm. The scribe turns the tablet slightly. He makes one sign, then another. He may group numbers and objects. He may use signs that resemble heads, vessels, grain, or animals. Although some have already grown abstract, you are watching pictures lose their picturesqueness. You are watching the world become system. Outside, someone shouts over a cart. A goat answers with unnecessary drama. The scribe does not look up. His attention rests on the tablet, because a poor mark can cause trouble. A mistaken amount may produce dispute. A poorly formed sign may confuse a later reader. Even in this ancient room, clarity is a form of peace, or at least a way to postpone quarrels until tomorrow. A quirky tidbit from the physical study of tablets is that some preserve fingerprints, fingernail marks, or smudges from the makers themselves. These marks are not writing, yet they are the most direct traces of the person behind the record. A scribe might carefully record barley or sheep, then accidentally leave the curve of a finger beside the official information. The inventory survives, but so does the body. That small detail makes the clay feel alive. You may never know the scribe's face. You may never know whether he was proud, bored, anxious, hungry, or secretly wishing he had chosen a different profession. But his finger touched this surface. His breath warmed this room. His wrist moved with trained precision. The record is administrative, yet the making is physical and deeply human. The open scholarly debate here turns on how quickly these signs became standardized. Some researchers argue that the earliest Uruk tablets already show organized conventions maintained by trained specialists. Others suggest a more fluid world, where local habits, experimental signs, and changing administrative needs shape the system over time. Specialists from leading universities still compare sign forms, tablet shapes, and archaeological contexts, because even small differences can suggest how writing learned to discipline itself. That discipline matters. A sign that changes too much cannot serve a city well. A sign must be recognizable beyond one hand and one moment. It must belong to a shared system. That means the scribe is not simply making marks. He is participating in agreement. He presses clay in a way another trained person can understand. Writing depends on this quiet pact between absent minds. You feel the cool tablet in your imagination. It rests against your palm with surprising weight. Its corners are rounded. Its surface is damp enough to smell faintly of riverbank. The signs catch shadows in their little grooves. If you tilt it toward the doorway, the marks become clearer, then disappear again in the brightness. Meaning hides inside texture. This is different from speech. Speech surrounds you and vanishes. Writing sits there and waits for your eyes. It requires posture. You bend over it. You turn it. You study it. A spoken order can strike quickly, but a tablet invites checking. It can be reopened in the mind again and again. That is part of its power and part of its discomfort. Because the tablet is quiet, but not weak, it can contradict memory. It can embarrass a liar. It can support an official. It can preserve a debt longer than anyone would prefer. It can make a promise heavier. The hand that presses signs into clay is also pressing social life into a new shape. A record is never just a record when people depend on it. The room grows warmer. The scribe's fingers darken with moisture and clay. He may work quickly, especially when the task is familiar. Perhaps he has written similar records many times. Jars counted, workers entered, fields noted, animals listed. Repetition can dull wonder. You, however, see the wonder precisely because it was repetitive. A civilization becomes itself through repeated actions, not only through great monuments. The great temple may impress the eye. The tablet changes the mind. On a shelf nearby, other tablets dry. Some are small and plain. Some are more complicated. A few may eventually be discarded, broken, or reused. Others may fall into debris and vanish beneath collapsing walls. Their survival depends on accident as much as intention. A fire meant for destruction may bake clay hard enough to preserve it. Disaster can become an archivist. History has a dark sense of humor. You imagine flames moving through a building centuries later, cracking beams, blackening walls, ruining lives. Yet in the heat, some tablets harden and survive. The record of grain, wool, and labor becomes durable because something went terribly wrong. It is unsettling to realize that many ancient voices reach you through damage. The scribe finishes the tablet and sets it aside. He does not pause for philosophical reflection. He may reach for another lump of clay. Work continues. Outside, the sun leans westward. Dust lifts in the alley. A child runs past carrying something that should probably not be carried at that speed. The city continues to move, and the clay continues to receive it. You notice how modest the invention remains at the level of touch. No trumpet sounds. No god visibly descends into the room. A reed presses earth. A hand repeats forms. A tablet dries. Yet this humble act allows thought to leave the body and become an object among other objects, meaning can now be stacked, sealed, stored, transported, lost, found, copied, misunderstood, and worshipfully misunderstood by future scholars. Perhaps that is the heart of this moment. Writing is not born only in the mind, It is born in the wrist, in the reed, in the dampness of clay, in the pressure that turns a movement into memory, and somewhere in the quiet room, beneath the smell of mud and heat, the human hand learns to make time hold still. Your gaze settles on a small tablet, whose marks seem, at first, as plain as all the others. Grain, jars, workers, animals, the usual quiet machinery of an early city. Yet something different waits among the signs. A mark no longer points only toward goods moving through storage rooms. It begins to point toward a person. A name appears, not a face, not a voice, not a memory carried by a family beside a hearth, only a small arrangement pressed into clay, probably difficult to pronounce with certainty now, and perhaps not even meant as a full personal signature in the modern sense. Still, the effect is startling. The anonymous world of early accounting begins to open, and through the crack, a human being steps halfway into history. The room around you feels close and warm. Dust hangs in the light. A jar of water sits near the wall. A scribe bends over clay, entering quantities, offices, and perhaps the names of people responsible for goods or labor. The tablet does not tell you whether these people were cheerful, cruel, clever, tired, or secretly afraid of temple supervisors. It offers something colder. It gives position. It gives duty. It gives identification. That is enough to change everything. Mainstream research on early Sumerian tablets, especially from Uruk and later sites, such as Jemdet Nazar and early dynastic cities, confirms that personal names became increasingly visible as writing developed. Scholars associated with major institutions, including Oxford, Yale, and the University of Pennsylvania, have shown how administrative records gradually moved from abstract accounting toward more precise references to individuals, offices, and institutions. The earliest writing did not immediately become biography, but it began making people recordable. That is a powerful word, recordable. A person who becomes recordable enters a new kind of existence. They can be remembered by an institution that does not love them. They can be assigned responsibility by someone who may never speak their name aloud with warmth. They can be credited, blamed, counted, summoned, or folded into a list. The clay does not embrace them. It holds them still. You imagine a man delivering a number of animals to a storehouse. Perhaps his name is spoken aloud while the scribe works. Perhaps another official watches, seal in hand, making sure the transaction is recognized. The animals shift and bleat. Their hooves knock against packed earth. Someone mutters, because one animal refuses to stand where civilization clearly requires it to stand. The scribe presses the identifying signs. The man leaves. The name remains. There is something almost ghostly in that simple survival. Most human beings who ever lived vanished without leaving any written trace. Their laughter dissolved. Their troubles passed into the soil. Their hands worked fields, built walls, carried children, shaped bread, and closed the eyes of the dead. Then silence took them. But once writing begins to hold names, even imperfectly, a few people are caught in the net. Not the famous first, not always kings, sometimes officials, workers, merchants, dependents, or people tied to deliveries and obligations. History does not begin with everyone receiving a fair introduction. It begins with whoever administration finds useful to mention. A quirky tidbit emerges from later Mesopotamian documents. where some names contain references to gods, family hopes, or small personal statements. Names could carry meaning, devotion, gratitude, or expectation. A child might be named in a way that thanked a deity, pleaded for protection, or remembered a family circumstance. So, when names enter writing, they may carry faint echoes of private feeling, even inside very dry records. Imagine finding tenderness trapped inside accounting. Even bureaucracy has its accidental poetry. You stand beside a doorway and listen. The sound of sandals passes in the lane. A reed pen taps the edge of a tablet. Somewhere nearby, a seal is pressed into clay, leaving an image of authority. The seal itself may show animals, figures, or designs, a tiny world rolled across the surface. The name and the seal both answer the same human anxiety. Who is responsible? Who stands behind this act? Who may be trusted or blamed when memory starts to fray? The question gives writing sharper teeth. An open scholarly debate surrounds how early names should be understood. Some specialists argue that certain early sign groups clearly represent personal names, while others warn that administrative titles, commodities, and phonetic elements can be difficult to separate in the oldest tablets. Researchers trained at leading universities continue to study sign order, repeated patterns, and later parallels, because the earliest texts are not generous with explanations. The clay speaks, but it speaks in a low voice. You feel that uncertainty as part of the atmosphere. Nothing is fully transparent. The tablet does not unfold like a modern letter. It gives fragments, quantities, signs, names, offices, and hints. It is like overhearing one side of an argument through a thick wall. You catch enough to know something important happened. You do not catch enough to feel satisfied. Perhaps that is why the earliest names feel so haunting. A royal inscription announces itself. It wants to be admired. It lifts its chin across time, but an administrative name may not want anything at all. It was written because somebody needed a record. Its survival is almost accidental. And yet, because of that accident, you encounter a person whom even his neighbors may not have expected history to remember. The city grows dim outside. Smoke from cooking fires spreads through the street. The smell of onions, grain, and animal dung rises into the evening. Voices soften as work slows. A child calls for someone whose name will never be written. A woman laughs in a courtyard, and that laughter leaves no mark. A laborer rubs his aching shoulder, and pain vanishes without a tablet. This is the sadness of early writing. It preserves, but unevenly. It gives you people through systems, not through their own inner lives. You meet them as names attached to wool, grain, land, tools, or labor. You learn what they owed, received, moved, counted, supervised, or surrendered. You rarely learn what they feared during storms, which songs made them pause, or whether they loved the smell of rain on hot dust. Still, the first names are not empty. They are sparks in a dark room. Once a name enters clay, human identity begins to stand apart from immediate presence. A person can be absent and still administratively present. They can be elsewhere, yet named. They can die, yet remain on a tablet stored in a room, buried in a ruin, lifted by an archaeologist, photographed under museum light, and read by scholars who never hear their living voice. You may think this is immortality. Perhaps it is only a very dry cousin of immortality, the sort that arrives wearing a clerk's expression. But it is still remarkable. To be named in writing is to be given a second, thinner body, not flesh, not breath, a body of marks. The scribe finishes the entry. The tablet is turned slightly, checked, and set with others. It joins a growing archive of obligations and movements. The name rests there quietly, surrounded by numbers and signs. No one in the room trembles at its significance. The workday continues, because history usually happens while people are busy being annoyed by ordinary tasks. Yet you can sense the threshold. Writing has moved from counting things to identifying people. It has begun to bind names to duties and events. It has started to make human beings legible to institutions, and through that process, strangely legible to the far future. The clay has learned not only to remember goods, but to remember someone. Night folds over the city. The tablet dries. The name hardens. The person walks home beneath a sky crowded with stars, unaware that a small part of him has remained behind, pressed into mud, waiting through the long sleep of ages. Perhaps this is the first quiet miracle of written history. Not that kings become grand, or gods become hymns, but that an ordinary name can survive the ruin of the world around it. The scent of incense drifts through a temple courtyard, thin and sweet above the heavier smell of grain. You stand where sacred space and practical necessity meet without embarrassment. The temple rises on its platform, pale against the bright sky. But around its base are storerooms, jars, baskets, workers, animals, seals, and tablets. Holiness lives beside inventory. The gods receive offerings, and someone must count them. That detail matters. A temple is not only a place of prayer in the early Sumerian city, it is also a center of land, labor, redistribution, craft production, and authority. Excavations and tablet studies associated with the University of Pennsylvania, Chicago, and Oxford have shown that temple institutions played major roles in organizing goods and people in southern Mesopotamia. The mainstream fact is steady and well supported. Writing developed in close connection with institutional economies, especially those tied to temples and large administrative households. You can feel that structure all around you. Men carry baskets of barley into shaded rooms. Women work with textiles in a nearby area, their fingers moving through wool with tired skill. A priestly official receives jars of oil. A seal cutter's work appears in miniature on clay ceilings. A scribe writes quantities, destinations, and responsible names. No single act seems dramatic. Together, they form a system. And systems are powerful because they hide inside routine. The temple wall is cool under your hand. It has been built from mud bricks, each one shaped by labor and sun. Above, the building suggests contact with heaven. Below, the ground is crowded with earthly concerns. Grain must not spoil. Animals must be assigned. Workers must be fed. Offerings must be registered. Fields must be managed. A god may own the wealth, but human officials handle the keys. There is a quiet tension there. Writing helps transform that tension into order. A delivery can be entered. A ration can be calculated. A storage jar can be sealed. An official can prove that goods passed correctly through his hands, or at least that a tablet says they did. The written mark gives authority a longer reach. It allows the temple to remember beyond the day, beyond the room, beyond the people who witnessed an exchange. The quirky tidbit is that some ration lists reveal beer as a major part of payment. Workers could receive allocations of grain products and beer, which sounds cheerful until you remember that it was still a labor system, not a festival arranged for everyone's happiness. Even so, there is something oddly human in imagining civilization's earliest paperwork devoted partly to making sure people got their beer. Administration can be stern, but it knows morale has a stomach. You walk beside a line of workers waiting near a distribution area. A jar is opened, a measure is poured. Dust clings to damp arms. A child watches from behind a post, bored and fascinated at once. A scribe marks the allotment. The sign does not taste the beer or feel the hunger. It simply records the exchange. Yet because it records, the exchange becomes part of an institutional memory. That memory can protect. That memory can control. A tablet can show that rations were owed. It can also show that a person has already received them, whether or not the person agrees. This is the double nature of writing inside authority. It creates accountability, but it also strengthens those who keep the records. Whoever reads the clay controls the meaning of the clay. Whoever stores it controls access to the past. An open scholarly debate continues over how much temple administration dominated early urban society. Some historians describe a strong temple economy, where religious institutions directed production and redistribution across large populations. Others argue that private households, kin groups, workshops, and palatial forces became important in different periods and places. Researchers at major universities still discuss the balance, because no ancient institution politely leaves behind an organizational chart. The ruins do not hand you certainty. They offer rooms, ceilings, tablets, storage bins, offering deposits, and patterns. From these, scholars reconstruct movement and power. They follow grain from field to storehouse. They follow wool from flock to workshop. They follow clay ceilings from doors to broken debris. It is detective work performed on the leftovers of administration, rather heroic, really, in the quietest possible way. You look again at the temple platform. It does not need to shout. Its height already speaks. To climb toward it is to move upward in a landscape where most buildings crouch low against heat and wind. It creates a visible center. Around it, writing creates an invisible center, a web of records linking fields, workers, offerings, and officials. One center stands in mud brick, the other stands in memory. The scribes who work within this system may not be priests themselves, yet their skill serves sacred authority. Their signs make offerings traceable. Their lists give shape to devotion. A sheep offered to a deity becomes more than a religious act. It becomes an entry. A jar of oil becomes both substance and sign. Faith and accounting sit at the same table, politely ignoring how strange they look together. There is no need to imagine cynicism everywhere. Ancient people could believe deeply and administer carefully at the same time. The temple may be a place where humans approach divine presence through ritual, food, fragrance, music, and formal action. But devotion still requires logistics. Someone must prepare bread. Someone must sweep floors. Someone must maintain vessels. Someone must know how much barley remains when the holy day arrives. Even the sacred needs storage. This is where writing becomes more than a convenience. It becomes a way of stabilizing a world that feels vulnerable to flood, drought, disease, dispute, and hunger. The rivers can bless the fields, then destroy them. Harvests can fail. Officials can die. Workers can scatter. Spoken memory can break under pressure. Tablets create continuity across these risks. You hear a seal being rolled over wet clay. The design appears in a narrow band. Figures and symbols compressed into authority. The sealed door or jar now carries a claim. It says that someone with recognized power closed this thing, approved this thing, guarded this thing. Writing and sealing work together like two quiet sentries. The courtyard darkens as a cloud passes before the sun. For a brief moment, the pale walls lose their glare. You notice the people more clearly. A woman with a bundle of wool, a man with dust in the lines of his face, an official adjusting his robe with unnecessary importance, a scribe blinking against the light, perhaps wishing everyone would stop interrupting him. The system depends on all of them, yet it names them unequally. Some command, some carry, some record, some are recorded. The tablet may look neutral, but it is born within hierarchy. It does not float above society like a star. It sits in someone's hand. That realization gives the clay a heavier silence. Writing helps build the first cities into durable institutions. It makes offerings accountable, labor measurable, goods traceable, and power more permanent. It turns the temple from a sacred building into a remembering body. Through tablets, the institution can look backward, compare, accuse, plan, and command. It can become older than any living official because its memory is stored outside them. Evening settles gently across the courtyard. Incense fades. The storehouse doors close. The last light touches the temple wall and turns it the color of bone. Inside baskets and jars, wealth waits in counted forms. Inside clay tablets, authority waits in signs. Perhaps this is the hidden cost of writing's early brilliance. It gives civilization memory. But memory quickly learns to serve power. It preserves the offering, the ration, the debt, and the command. It lets the temple speak beyond the voice, beyond the ritual, beyond the moment, and in the quiet after work, the clay keeps watch. A distant bell of hammered metal seems to tremble through the morning air, though the sound may only be a tool striking wood in a nearby yard. You are seated now inside a small room where the city's memory is being trained one hand at a time. The walls are plain. The floor is dusty. The light is soft enough to make every clay tablet look older than it is. Here, young scribes learn to become useful. The room smells of wet clay, reed, sweat, and the faint sourness of nervous children trying not to make mistakes. A teacher sits where everyone can see him, which is unfortunate for everyone. His authority is not grand like a temple platform, but it is immediate. He can correct a sign, scold a student, break a badly made tablet, or make a boy copy the same list until his wrist aches and his pride becomes more manageable. This is the hidden nursery of writing. By the early second millennium before the Common Era, Mesopotamian scribal education is clearly visible in school tablets from cities such as Nippur. Scholars at the University of Pennsylvania, Yale, and other major centers have studied these tablets, many of which preserve exercises, sign lists, model texts, and mistakes. The mainstream fact is firm. Scribes were trained through copying, memorization, repetition, and correction, forming a literate profession that guarded access to written knowledge. You watch a student take a fresh lump of clay. He flattens it with both hands, smoothing the surface as carefully as his impatience allows. He holds the reed stylus awkwardly. His teacher has already demonstrated the sign. It looks simple when the teacher makes it. It looks much less simple when the boy tries. The first wedge leans too far. The second sits too deep. The third appears to be attempting escape. The teacher sighs. Some things never change. A quirky detail from scribal school tablets is that students sometimes copied model dialogues about lazy pupils, harsh teachers, proud graduates, and anxious family expectations. These texts can feel oddly familiar, as if the ancient classroom has leaned close and whispered that education has always involved ambition, complaint, and mild humiliation. Somewhere in that room, one student probably believed he was misunderstood by history. He may have been right, but his handwriting still needed work. The curriculum is not casual. Students copy lists of signs, lists of words, lists of professions, animals, plants, stones, cities, and objects. The world is arranged in columns. The mind is trained to classify reality through writing. This is not merely learning to make marks. It is learning to see the world through the categories of a scribal culture. The tablet becomes a little universe. You hear the scratch and press of many styluses, not loud, not musical, just steady. A soft rain of wedges enters clay. A student murmurs a word under his breath. Another glances sideways, hoping to see how a sign should be formed. The teacher notices. Of course he notices. Teachers have been noticing sideways glances since the invention of students. The room carries discipline, but also wonder. To learn writing is to cross a boundary most people never cross. Many farmers, potters, herders, weavers, builders, and laborers live fully inside their worlds without reading tablets. They know seasons, animals, tools, kinship, markets, songs, and prayers. Their knowledge is real, practical, and often immense, but scribal knowledge has a different social power. It makes the student useful to institutions. That usefulness can lift him. It can also bind him. A trained scribe may serve temples, palaces, merchants, legal authorities, or private households. He may record transactions, copy letters, draft contracts, write lists, preserve hymns, and maintain archives. His work can bring status. It can also bring long hours spent over clay, while other people blame him for numbers they do not like. Literacy opens doors, but not always comfortable ones. There is an open scholarly debate about how broad literacy was in Sumerian and later Mesopotamian society. Some historians argue that writing remained largely the domain of trained specialists, a narrow class serving institutions and elites. Others suggest more varied levels of practical literacy among merchants, officials, and certain households. Researchers from major universities continue to study signatures, private archives, school tablets, and legal documents, because literacy is not a simple yes or no condition. A person might recognize names. A person might read numbers. A person might dictate to a scribe without writing a single sign. Another might write routine accounts but never compose a hymn. Literacy has layers, and ancient clay preserves those layers unevenly. The question is not only who could read, it is what they could read, why they needed it, and who allowed them to learn. You look at the students again. Their shoulders bend forward. Their fingers carry damp smears. Some are serious, some are restless. One appears to be staring at the doorway with the spiritual intensity of a prisoner. Outside, the city moves in sun and dust. Inside, time is divided into exercises. Copy this. Repeat that. Learn the sign. Remember the list. Do not insult the clay with that terrible wedge. The teacher demonstrates again. His stylus moves with calm economy. The sign appears cleanly. The students watch, because the hand is teaching what the mouth cannot fully explain. Scribal knowledge lives in muscle as well as memory. The angle of the reed matters. The pressure matters. The order of strokes matters. A good scribe carries the system in his fingers. That is an intimate form of civilization. You notice practice tablets stacked near a wall. Some are neat, some are tragic. Many will not be preserved with reverence. They are exercises, not declarations. Yet to modern scholars, student tablets are precious because they show the process behind literacy. Finished records show what writing did for institutions. School tablets show how human beings were trained to make writing possible. The student presses another sign. This one is better, not perfect, better. The small improvement feels strangely moving. In the long path from token to tablet, from picture to sign, from accounting to literature, there must always be someone learning imperfectly. No writing system survives through invention alone. It survives through teaching. Every generation must rebuild the system inside new hands. The ancient classroom is a bridge between dead scribes and living students, between old tablets and future records. A faint breeze enters through the doorway. It carries the smell of baked bread and canal water. The students pause only briefly. Their teacher does not approve of breezes as an excuse for distraction. A tablet is turned. Another surface is filled. The room settles back into its soft rhythm. You begin to sense that the first scribes were not merely record keepers. They were keepers of method. They preserved signs by copying them. They preserved words by arranging them. They preserved power by serving it. They preserved myths by learning enough discipline to write them down without turning every god's name into a clay accident. Perhaps that is why scribal schools feel both humble and mysterious. There are no armies here, no blazing monuments, no king shouting at the horizon. There are children with clay, teachers with opinions, and signs repeated until they become part of the body. Yet from this slow pressure comes the ability to store law, prayer, trade, complaint, memory, and imagination. The day grows warmer. The students grow quieter. A finished exercise tablet rests before one young scribe, its surface filled with signs he could not have made months ago. He does not yet command the written world, but the door has opened. Through that door lies service, authority, frustration, and the strange privilege of speaking to time. Perhaps every civilization needs such rooms, small rooms, dusty rooms, rooms where the future is bored, corrected, and made to practice again. Cold water glimmers in a jar beside the scribe's knee, and the room feels suddenly attentive. The signs before you no longer behave like simple pictures. A head is not always a head. A star is not always a star. A reed, a bowl, a foot, a mouth, and a hand begin to loosen from the objects they once resembled. They start moving toward a sound. This is where writing becomes stranger. At first, a sign may point toward something visible: grain, a sheep, a jar, a field, a human head. Such signs are not difficult to imagine, even when their forms become stiff and abstract. But human speech is not made only of visible things. You cannot easily draw a debt, a verb, a command, a name ending, a sound tucked inside another sound, or the little grammatical pieces that hold language together. So the signs must learn new tricks. The mainstream fact is that Sumerian writing gradually developed phonetic uses, allowing signs to represent sounds as well as objects or ideas. Scholars at Oxford, the University of Pennsylvania, and Chicago have long studied this transformation through sign lists, early tablets, and later bilingual traditions. This shift made writing more flexible, letting scribes record names, grammar, speech patterns, and eventually literature with far greater precision. You can feel the importance of that change in the room. The clay tablet lies flat. The reed stylus waits, a sign that once suggested an object is pressed into service for a sound value. Perhaps because the word for that object sounds like part of another word, this is clever, practical, and slightly mischievous. It means a picture can escape its own body, a sign can stop being loyal to what it looks like, a fish might help write something that is not fish, a star might help name a god, a sky, a sound, or an idea. A foot might suggest walking, standing, carrying, or a syllable inside a word. The sign becomes layered. It no longer has one meaning. It has a little household of meanings, some obvious, some learned, some probably annoying to beginners. You may think modern spelling is difficult, and you are not wrong. English spelling often behaves like a guest who arrived centuries ago and refused to leave. But ancient scribes lived with signs that could carry multiple readings depending on context. A skilled reader did not merely see marks. He interpreted possibilities. He listened with his eyes. That phrase matters. He listened with his eyes. The room seems quieter as you consider it. Writing is no longer simply showing objects or numbers. It is beginning to capture speech itself, not perfectly, not fully, not all at once, but with growing ambition. Spoken language, once carried only by breath and memory, begins entering clay through sound values. The tablet becomes not just a storehouse of things, but a surface where the voice can leave tracks. A quirky tidbit from later scribal culture is that ancient Mesopotamian scholars loved wordplay, learned sign interpretations, and hidden associations between names, sounds, and meanings. Some texts treat writing almost like a puzzle box, where signs can reveal secret connections. This is not surprising. Once a sign has several values, scholars will eventually decide that the universe is probably sending messages through spelling. Humanity has always been wonderfully dangerous near symbols. You watch a young scribe copy a word he does not yet understand fully. His teacher gives the sound. The student repeats it softly. His stylus presses one sign, then another. The signs do not form an alphabet. They are not simple letters, lined up like obedient soldiers. They are a mixed system of logograms, syllabic signs, numerical signs, and determinatives. Those modern terms can sound dry, but the reality is alive. Some signs speak as words. Some speak as sounds. Some quietly tell you what category a word belongs to. Writing becomes a landscape with many paths. This is why cuneiform could travel beyond Sumerian. Over time, the system was adapted for Akkadian and other languages, even though those languages differed greatly from Sumerian. The signs were flexible enough to be repurposed. A system born in one linguistic world became a tool for others. That is not a small accomplishment. It is a sign of deep scribal ingenuity, and perhaps also of deep scribal stubbornness. Why invent a simpler system when you can inherit a complicated one and make generations suffer respectfully? Yet there is beauty in that complexity. The signs carry memory from one language into another. They preserve older values, even when speech changes around them. They allow scribes to write Sumerian long after it ceased being spoken in daily life. A dead language can remain alive in classrooms, rituals, scholarship, and prestige. Clay becomes a place where living voices and ancient voices share space uneasily. The open scholarly debate turns on how early and how deliberately phonetic writing developed. Some researchers argue that sound-based writing emerged gradually from the need to record personal names and grammatical details. Others suggest that phonetic values may have been present in limited ways earlier than the surviving evidence clearly proves. Specialists from major universities still analyze sign sequences and contexts. Because the earliest tablets rarely pause to explain their own logic, you feel the difficulty. The evidence is not a neat staircase. It is scattered stones in mist. A sign here, a name there, a repeated pattern, a later clue reaching backward. Scholars reconstruct the path carefully, knowing that the clay preserves results better than intentions. You can see what was written. It is harder to see the exact moment someone realized a sign could carry sound apart from image. That moment, whenever it came, must have been quiet. Perhaps a scribe needed to record a foreign name. Perhaps a local name resisted simple picturing. Perhaps administrative precision demanded a sound that no object sign could provide. The scribe borrowed a sign for its spoken value, using the ear to guide the hand. Once that door opened, the writing system became more spacious. Names could be written more accurately. Verbs could bend into records. Stories could breathe more deeply. The transformation is not sudden magic. It is a slow, intellectual rearrangement. The visible world is no longer enough. Writing must reach toward the invisible structures of speech. It must represent not only sheep and jars, but actions, relationships, endings, beginnings, divine names, human titles, and sounds that vanish the instant they are spoken. The scent of damp clay sharpens. A student murmurs a sign value, then another. His lips barely move. His hand follows. In that tiny coordination, mouth, ear, eye, and wrist become part of one system. This is not merely administration. This is language, learning how to occupy matter. You realize why writing's history feels almost uncanny here. The first signs once stood close to objects, as shadows stand close to bodies. Now the signs drift away, obedient to sound rather than sight. They become less like pictures and more like echoes pressed into mud. A tablet can now hold something that was never visible at all. A command, a prayer, a boast, a lament, a joke, if the scribe is lucky and the supervisor is absent. Outside the room, the city continues in bright heat. Boats move on canals, grain dust rises, dogs sleep in patches of shade, people speak constantly, asking, bargaining, complaining, singing, swearing softly, and calling children home. Most of that speech vanishes, but now some part of speech can be caught, not just the thing meant, but the sound that carries meaning. That is the hidden crossing. A society can count without fully writing speech. It can list goods and mark ownership. But when writing begins to follow sound, it becomes capable of entering the deep interior of language. It can preserve names more faithfully, record myths more richly, and carry words across centuries with their shape partly intact. The human voice, once tied to a single breath, gains a second life in signs. The student finishes his exercise. The tablet surface is crowded, imperfect, and beautiful in its stubborn effort. He looks relieved, as all students do when the moment of judgment is not immediate. The teacher studies the work. He taps one sign with the reed. Correction arrives. Civilization advances through disappointment. The corrected sign sits quietly among the others. It is small, but it belongs to a revolution. The picture has become sound. The object has become syllable. The hand has learned to write not only what the eye sees, but what the ear remembers. Perhaps this is when writing truly begins to whisper. Not when clay counts the world, but when clay learns to imitate the vanishing music of speech. Your mind follows the signs out of the storeroom and into a deeper chamber of human memory. The clay no longer carries only barley, labor, oil, and counted animals. It begins to hold stories, not all at once, not with the sudden confidence of a finished library, slowly, carefully, almost shyly. The old spoken tales move toward the tablet, where gods, kings, floods, battles, dreams, and beginnings can become more durable than breath. The room feels different now. A lamp burns with a low flame. Its oil gives off a warm, faint smell. Shadows tremble along the wall as a scribe bends over clay, not merely recording a delivery, but shaping a line of narrative. The work is still disciplined. The signs must be correct. The tradition must be respected. Yet something has changed in the purpose of the hand. It is no longer only protecting accounts, it is protecting a world. Mainstream research confirms that some of the most important early literary traditions of Mesopotamia were written down in Sumerian, especially in later copies from scribal schools and temple contexts. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied hymns, myths, royal narratives, lamentations, wisdom texts, and epic material preserved on clay. The fact is steady. Writing eventually became a vessel for memory far beyond administration. You hear the difference in the silence. A list tells you what must be managed. A myth tells you what a people believe the world means. It speaks of gods who organize heaven and earth, of cities chosen and abandoned, of kings granted power, of floods sent against humankind, of divine anger, divine favor, and human fragility. These stories do not behave like simple entertainment. They are maps of fear and order. You sit near the scribe as he copies a tale older than his tablet. Perhaps he learned it from an earlier copy. Perhaps that copy came from another school, another city, another line of teachers. Behind every written myth stands a long corridor of voices, storytellers, priests, singers, elders, mothers, apprentices, and ritual specialists may have carried pieces of these tales before writing fixed them into clay. The tablet is not the beginning of myth. It is one of myth's shelters. That distinction matters. When a myth enters writing, it becomes more stable, yet not completely frozen. Versions can differ. Lines can shift. Names can vary. A student can make an error. And suddenly, a god has acquired a spelling problem. The modern reader may smile, but the ancient teacher probably did not. Sacred memory still depended on human hands, and human hands are wonderfully capable of making trouble. A quirky tidbit from Mesopotamian literary culture is that some scribes copied humorous or satirical compositions alongside solemn traditions. Ancient learned people did not live only in thunder and cosmic dread. They could preserve school jokes, disputations between objects, and playful arguments where a hoe, a tree, or a piece of equipment might practically demand respect. Apparently, even in the shadow of the gods, someone found time to let a farming tool have opinions. That small humor makes the great myths feel more human. The same culture that wrote of creation and kingship also laughed, complained, debated, and teased. Clay held reverence, but also personality. It preserved the high voice of ritual and the sly voice of classroom cleverness. The tablet could become a shrine, a lesson, a record, or a quiet little stage where the ancient mind performed for itself. Yet the myths carry a darker undertone. They often imagine humanity as small within a vast divine order. People are shaped, assigned labor, threatened by flood, dependent on favor, and vulnerable to decisions made beyond their hearing. You listen to that worldview and sense why writing mattered. A spoken myth can calm a room. A written myth can outlive the room. It can be copied after a city falls. It can whisper across generations that the world has a pattern, even when the pattern is severe. The open scholarly debate here concerns how these written myths relate to older oral performance. Some researchers argue that tablets preserve only a narrow, school-shaped version of wider living traditions. Others believe the written compositions reflect highly developed literary artistry within scribal culture itself. Scholars at leading universities continue comparing repeated lines, variant copies, and classroom contexts, because the tablets reveal texts, but not always the voices that first carried them. You feel that absence. You can see the signs, but you cannot hear the original performance. You do not know the singer's pace, the priest's tone, the audience's breath, or the gestures made during recitation. You cannot know whether a line once frightened children, comforted widows, instructed rulers, or made tired workers stare into the fire. The tablet preserves words, but the living atmosphere has thinned. Still, something powerful remains. The myth of a great flood, preserved in several Mesopotamian traditions, carries the memory of divine destruction and human survival. The stories differ across time and language, but the image is unforgettable. Water rises. Human noise troubles the gods. A chosen survivor receives warning. A vessel saves life. The world begins again under a sky washed clean and terrible, whether shaped by memory of real floods, theological reflection, or ancient storytelling patterns. The tale feels rooted in a land where rivers could nourish and ruin in the same season. You imagine the marshes after a flood, reeds bent flat, mud shining in dawn light, dead fish in shallow pools, walls slumped into brown water, a family standing on higher ground, silent, counting what remains. In such a world, a flood story is not abstract. It grows from the body's knowledge of water. Writing gives that fear endurance. A king list can say that kingship descended from heaven. A myth can say that cities were assigned divine patrons. A hymn can praise a goddess whose favor makes rulers tremble. These texts are not merely old stories placed on clay for charm. They help define authority, explain catastrophe, justify power, and locate human life inside a cosmic household. The gods may be distant, but their paperwork, naturally, is very thorough. The lamp flickers. The scribe pauses, perhaps to wet his fingers or adjust the tablet. His face is half lit. He may not feel he is inventing literature. He may feel he is copying what must be copied. That is often how sacred or traditional knowledge survives, not through originality, but through care. The artist hides inside the servant of memory. You look at the signs and sense their layered time. One line may hold a story sung centuries earlier. One divine name may carry echoes from older cities. One phrase may have crossed languages, schools, and political changes. The tablet is small, but it contains a crowded past. It is less like a page than a chamber. This is where writing becomes almost unsettling again. Once myth enters clay, the ancient gods gain a new kind of body. Not statues, not temples, not stars. Text. A god can be invoked by marks. A divine command can be copied by students. A cosmic event can sit in a schoolroom beside a multiplication exercise. The sacred becomes teachable, repeatable, examinable. One can almost hear a teacher saying that the end of the world is important, but the signs must still be neat. The scribe finishes a passage and sets the tablet aside. Outside, night presses softly against the city. Dogs bark in the distance, somewhere. A song rises and fades before you can understand it. Speech disappears. Clay remains. Perhaps this is the second birth of writing. It begins by helping cities remember goods, then slowly dares to remember meaning. It takes the old stories from mouths and places them into earth. The result is not pure preservation. Because every copy changes something, it is not pure invention. Because the stories are already ancient, it is a meeting place. In that meeting, human beings learn to give their gods fears, jokes, disasters, and hopes a harder surface. They learn that a myth can cross death. They learn that a voice, once pressed into clay, may sleep for thousands of years, then wake beneath another person's eyes. The wind seems to shift across the southern plain, carrying your attention beyond Sumer's river cities and toward other lands where marks also begin to gather meaning. The question grows wider now and more delicate. Who truly wrote first? Was it the people of Uruk pressing signs into clay? Was it Egypt carving signs along the Nile? Was it another region whose experiments have mostly vanished, leaving only a few stubborn clues beneath dust? The answer is not as simple as a trophy. You stand beside a canal at dusk, watching the water darken under reeds. Goods arrive from distant places, and with them come rumors of other systems, other marks, other ways of remembering. Boats carry grain and wool. Caravans bring stone, metal, timber, shells, and ideas. The ancient world is not silent between cities. It moves, it trades, it borrows, it watches, it misunderstands creatively, which is often how culture travels. Mainstream archaeology places the earliest known Mesopotamian writing at Uruk in the late 4th millennium before the Common Era, while early Egyptian hieroglyphic evidence appears around a similar broad period. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, Chicago, and other major research centers continue to compare the evidence with care. The established fact is that both Mesopotamia and Egypt produced extraordinarily early writing systems, though their materials, purposes, and visual worlds differed greatly. That difference matters. In Sumer, the tablet is small, portable, and practical. Clay receives the reed. Lists grow dense and administrative. In Egypt, signs bloom across labels, tomb goods, monuments, and sacred contexts with striking visual elegance. Stone, ivory, wood, pottery, and inked surfaces become carriers of meaning. The Nile world loves image, ceremony, and display. Mesopotamia loves clay, system, and a suspiciously intense concern for accounting. Both worlds are brilliant, both worlds are strange. You imagine an Egyptian craftsman incising signs near a royal burial, where power wishes to step beyond death. You imagine a Sumerian scribe entering quantities of barley near a temple storehouse, where power wishes to keep lunch properly organized. One system seems to speak with gods and kings from the beginning. The other seems to argue with sheep, jars, and rations. Yet both are doing something astonishing. They are turning meaning into marks that can survive absence. A quirky tidbit hides in this comparison. Some early Egyptian tags and labels are small enough to seem almost modest. Despite their royal settings, they may name places, goods, or rulers, serving administrative purposes in a world already wrapped in ceremony. So even where writing appears grand and sacred, it may still be quietly concerned with ownership, contents, and control. Apparently, the afterlife also appreciated good labeling. The comparison becomes even wider when you think of Elam, in what is now southwestern Iran. There, early recording systems appear in close relation to Mesopotamian developments, including Proto-Elamite tablets, whose signs remain only partly understood. These tablets are haunting because they are visibly organized, clearly meaningful, and still resistant to full reading. They remind you that writing's early history is not a single bright road, but a landscape of experiments. Some roads are lost. You stand now in imagination at a crossroads of ancient trade, where a merchant from one land meets another whose language sounds unfamiliar. They exchange goods, gestures, weights, suspicions, and perhaps marks. Nobody pauses to announce the birth of international intellectual history. They simply want the transaction to work. Yet in such meetings, habits may spread. A sealing practice, a numerical system, a way of marking containers, a belief that clay, bone, ivory, or stone can carry authority. The open scholarly debate is careful and unresolved. Some researchers argue that Sumerian writing arose independently from long local accounting traditions, while Egyptian writing may have developed independently in a separate cultural setting. Others propose that contact across the Near East could have encouraged the idea of writing, even if each system formed in its own language and in style. Leading university scholars continue to discuss chronology, transmission, and invention because the evidence appears close in time and incomplete in detail. That uncertainty is not a failure. It is the shape of the evidence. You cannot simply place all early writing systems in a neat race and crown a winner. The surviving tablets, labels, inscriptions, and sealings have passed through accident, excavation, erosion, fire, looting, and scholarly interpretation. Many materials perish easily. Wood decays. Leather disappears. Papyrus rarely survives outside special conditions. Clay survives better, which gives Mesopotamia a louder archaeological voice. But louder does not always mean alone. This thought slows the mystery. Maybe Sumer invented writing first, in the form that survives most clearly. Maybe Egypt developed its own system near the same horizon. Maybe the idea of notation passed between regions before becoming true writing in different ways. Maybe people in several places were circling the same threshold, pushed by administration, kingship, ritual, trade, and memory. the human mind, under pressure, sometimes finds similar doors. The sky over the plain deepens. Stars appear one by one. You hear the creak of a loaded cart, the soft complaint of wheels, and the low murmur of traders counting goods. Counting is universal. Forgetting is universal. Authority is ambitious everywhere. It is not shocking that more than one society would try to make memory visible. Still, Sumer holds a special place. Its tablets reveal an early and continuous path from accounting marks toward full writing. School traditions, literary works, legal texts, letters, and scholarly culture. The clay record is enormous, even if much remains unpublished or unread by most people. Through Sumer and later Mesopotamia, you can watch writing evolve across centuries with remarkable depth. It is like seeing the bones of memory grow joints, muscles, and finally, a voice. Egypt offers a different beauty. Its hieroglyphs preserve image and sign together with a visual grace that still grips the eye. The signs can stand on temple walls with birds, eyes, reeds, hands, and crowns arranged in solemn balance. Egyptian writing becomes architecture, theology, royal presence, and cosmic order. It wants to be seen as much as read. Sumerian writing feels earthier. It crouches in clay. It records work before it sings. It becomes literature after it has learned discipline in storerooms. It is born with dust under its fingernails. That may be why its story feels so intimate. You sense not only kings and gods, but also the administrative pulse of daily life. A sheep enters history because someone had to count it. The sheep, to be fair, probably had no opinion on becoming historically significant. The rivalry between early systems may tempt the modern mind into certainty. People love beginnings. They love firsts, the first city, the first king, the first word. But ancient beginnings rarely behave politely. They blur, they overlap, they leave partial tracks. One discovery can change the argument. One newly studied tablet can sharpen or complicate a timeline. Scholars speak cautiously because the past has embarrassed confidence many times. You move through a marketplace where foreign goods lie beside local wares, dark stone from distant mountains, shell from far waters, timber carried with effort into a land hungry for wood. Each object testifies to connection. Even without direct proof of borrowed writing, the world around Sumer is not sealed. Ideas move beside objects, though they leave lighter footprints. Perhaps the question is not only who wrote first, perhaps the question is why several societies reached for writing when they did. Population grew, cities expanded, temples and courts gathered wealth, rulers needed display, trade crossed distances, ritual demanded memory. Human speech, warm and flexible, could not bear the whole weight alone. Marks became necessary. Different lands shaped those marks according to their own materials, languages, beliefs, and ambitions. Night rests over the imagined crossroads. A Sumerian tablet lies in one direction, an Egyptian label in another. A Proto-Elamite tablet waits in silence, still partly closed to understanding. Each object carries a piece of the same larger transformation. Human beings are teaching matter to remember. The mystery remains calm, but not empty. Sumer may stand at the front of the surviving record, with Uruk's clay tablets among the earliest known witnesses. Yet the wider ancient world surrounds that achievement with echoes, rivals, and unanswered questions. Writing does not rise from one simple flame. It glows from several fires, some bright, some buried, some nearly gone, and in the darkness between them, the first marks continue to ask whether invention belongs to one people or to a moment when humanity itself began needing memory stronger than breath. A cool draft moves through a narrow archive room, and your attention turns toward the people whose hands made the signs. Not the kings whose names were praised, not the gods whose temples gathered offerings, not the officials whose seals rolled proudly across clay. You are searching for the quieter inventors, the trained and unknown scribes who stood between speech and permanence. Most of them are gone without faces. Their work remains everywhere, yet their lives remain difficult to see. They copied lists, recorded deliveries, wrote letters, drafted contracts, preserved hymns, and corrected students who probably deserved at least some correction. They served temples, palaces, merchants, and households. They moved through the city as practical magicians, though the magic was made of discipline, not thunder. They knew signs others could not read. They could summon an absent transaction back into the room. That gave them power. Mainstream studies from institutions such as the University of Pennsylvania, Yale, and Chicago confirm that scribes formed a specialized literate profession in Mesopotamian society. Their training required long practice, and their skills connected them to administration, law, scholarship, and literature. The fact is important because writing was not only an invention of symbols. It depended on a human class capable of sustaining those symbols across generations. You imagine one of them walking before sunrise. The city is still gray. Bread ovens are beginning to warm. A rooster complains from somewhere unseen, offering his own unnecessary administrative announcement. The scribe carries a stylus case, perhaps a small tablet, perhaps a memory full of lists. His robe is plain. Though he may hold himself with quiet pride, he is not a farmer, though he depends on grain. He is not a ruler, though rulers depend on records. He is not a priest, though sacred institutions need his hand. He lives in between. That in-between position is easy to overlook, but it may be where history often changes. The scribe is a servant of authority, yet he is also its interpreter. A command spoken by an official becomes durable only when the scribe shapes it. A contract matters because someone writes the terms. A letter reaches a distant person because someone knows how to give speech a clay body. The scribe is not always the source of power, but he controls a doorway through which power passes. The room where he works is modest: a bench, tablets, a jar of water, clay prepared in lumps, shelves with dried records, maybe a seal nearby, maybe an older tablet to consult. The smell is familiar now: damp clay mixed with dust and human concentration. You can hear his reed stylus press and lift, in a patient rhythm. Each motion is small. Together, they shape civilization's memory. A quirky tidbit from Mesopotamian school literature is that scribes sometimes imagined their profession with proud exaggeration. Some texts praise scribal work as superior to manual labor, hinting that the scribe could escape the harsher tasks of field and workshop. It is a very old occupational advertisement, and like most such advertisements, it probably leaves out the back pain, eye strain, angry supervisors, and endless copying. Still, the pride makes sense. To write is to handle what others cannot handle. A farmer may know the soil better than any scribe. A potter may understand clay in a deeper tactile way. A boatman may read currents no tablet can explain. But the scribe reads institutional memory. He sees patterns across goods, people, months, names, and obligations. He can compare the present against the stored past. That is a powerful form of sight. You watch him consult an older tablet, his eyes move over the marks. He is not merely reading, he is entering another person's hand. Some previous scribe shaped those signs. Perhaps he wrote cleanly. Perhaps he wrote like a tired spider. Either way, the current scribe must understand him. Writing creates relationships between people who never meet. Every archive is a crowd of absent hands trying to remain legible. That thought is strangely tender. The forgotten inventors of writing were not necessarily one group in one room. They were generations of people solving small problems, refining marks, teaching students, standardizing forms, adapting signs to language, and deciding which traditions deserved copying. Their invention was cumulative. It passed through fingers. It was tested by use. It survived because people needed it again the next day. An open scholarly debate surrounds the social identity of early scribes. Some researchers see them as closely tied to temple and palace institutions, trained within elite administrative environments. Others emphasize that scribal skills could serve wider networks of merchants, households, and local officials, especially in later periods. Scholars at major universities continue studying colophons, school tablets, contracts, and archives, because the title of scribe did not mean exactly the same thing everywhere or always. The clay preserves roles better than personalities. You might find a scribe's name at the end of a copied tablet, a tiny claim of authorship or responsibility. You might find a seal impression, a legal formula, a school exercise, or a letter written for someone else. But you rarely find the inner person. The scribe who preserves a lament may have laughed loudly at dinner. The scribe who writes a stern contract may have been gentle with his child. The scribe who copies a hymn may have secretly been thinking about lunch. History usually refuses to be that generous, yet traces remain in small accidents, a correction squeezed between lines, a sign carefully repaired, a tablet turned over to use every bit of space, a school exercise where the student's hand becomes steadier by the final row. These details reveal effort, not grand biography, but presence. You feel the person through work. The city outside continues its restless order. Merchants argue over measures, laborers lift baskets, priests prepare offerings, families cook, quarrel, sleep, and wake. The scribe's marks connect many of these lives without capturing them fully. He records the official shape of society, not its entire truth. That is why the archive is both rich and incomplete. It remembers what institutions cared to remember. This limitation should make you cautious. Writing is not the same as history itself. It is a surviving selection. It is what someone chose, needed, or was ordered to record. The mute majority remains mostly outside the tablet's light. The scribe can preserve a ration, but not the taste of hunger. He can record a field, but not the ache in the shoulders of those who harvested it. He can write a name, but not the whole life attached to it. Still, without him, even less would remain. A soft sound comes from the archive doorway. Someone brings another tablet, another matter requiring record. The scribe takes it with practiced resignation. His day is not a legend. It is labor with a stylus. Yet through that labor, thoughts cross centuries, Legal decisions survive. Stories survive. Words in a dead language survive. The structure of an ancient economy survives. Even small human foolishness survives, which may be the surest proof of authenticity. You begin to see the forgotten inventors not as a single heroic figure, but as a long procession. One teaches another. One copies what another copied. One adjusts a sign. One uses a sign for sound. One preserves an old hymn. One writes a student exercise. One seals a document. One stores a tablet in a basket, never imagining that the basket's ruin will become a scholar's treasure. Their anonymity feels almost appropriate. Writing itself is a way of letting the sign stand where the person cannot. The makers disappear into the marks. They become the pressure of a wedge, the order of a list, the neatness of a column, the confidence of a formula. They do not speak loudly. They endure quietly, hidden inside the system they served. Night settles around the archive. The last tablets are set aside. A lamp burns low, and the walls seem to hold the day's warmth. The scribe leaves, perhaps tired, perhaps satisfied, perhaps merely ready to be free of clay. Behind him, the tablets remain in still rows, patient and unreadable to most people nearby. Perhaps the deepest mystery is not who invented writing in a single bright moment. Perhaps it is how many unnamed hands were needed to keep inventing it every day, until signs became memory, memory became authority, and authority became history. The earth rises ahead of you in a long, weathered mound, quiet beneath the open sky. It does not look like a city at first. It looks like a tired hill softened by wind, sun, rain, and centuries of silence. Scrub grows along its sides. Birds pass over without concern. A shepherd might guide animals near its base, thinking only of shade, water, and the stubborn behavior of goats. Yet beneath that mound, walls sleep. Rooms sleep, tablets sleep. This is how many Sumerian cities returned to the landscape. Mud brick melted back into earth, streets filled with debris, roofs collapsed into rooms, archives broke, scattered, burned, or vanished under dust. The city did not disappear in one theatrical gesture. It settled downward, layer by layer, until human memory became geology. Archaeology gives such mounds their voice again. Excavations at sites such as Uruk, Nippur, Lagash, and other ancient places have revealed tablets, seals, buildings, graves, tools, and traces of ordinary life. Research supported by major museums and universities, including Pennsylvania, Chicago, Oxford, and Yale, confirms that tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets survive from Mesopotamia. The mainstream fact is almost overwhelming. The written past of Sumer and its successors is not a single archive, but a vast broken sea of clay. You stand at the edge of an excavation trench. The morning air is dry and cool. The smell is dust, canvas, sweat, and old earth newly opened. Workers move carefully with baskets. Archaeologists crouch with brushes and notebooks. A wall line emerges, pale and uneven. The bricks are made of the same material as the soil around them, so the eye must learn patience. Ancient mud does not announce itself with marble confidence. It whispers in texture. A trowel touches the ground lightly. A small object appears. Perhaps it is a ceiling, perhaps a pottery shard, perhaps nothing important at all, though nothing important has fooled archaeologists before. Then a tablet edge shows itself, dark against the surrounding soil. Everyone slows. The past has offered a corner. This moment feels sacred, although no priest stands nearby. The tablet may be broken. Most are not complete little miracles. It may be chipped, cracked, burned, or worn. Its signs may be faint. It may contain a major literary passage, or it may say something gloriously ordinary about barley. Either way, it has crossed time. A hand pressed those signs when the city breathed. Another hand lifts them when the city is dust. A quirky tidbit from excavation history is that early archaeologists sometimes found enormous numbers of tablets before the discipline had fully developed modern recording methods. Some tablets entered museums with incomplete context, which makes present scholars sigh in a very academic but deeply human way. The object survived, the exact story of its room, layer, and neighbors sometimes did not. Even archaeology has its paperwork regrets. You imagine the tablet being cleaned. Dirt flakes away from the grooves. The signs begin to catch light. Someone reads a familiar sign, then another, a date formula perhaps, a ration amount, a divine name, a school exercise, a fragment of a hymn. Every possibility opens a different doorway. The mound around you becomes less silent. It is no longer only earth. It is a layered memory of rooms where people cooked, counted, copied, sealed, prayed, stored grain, taught students, and argued about things that probably felt urgent. The trench cuts through centuries. One layer may belong to a later occupation, another to an earlier rebuilding. Floors rise upon older floors. Cities are not built once, they are revised. That is a humbling thought. People repair walls because life must continue. They fill old rooms because space is needed. They build over memories because the present presses hard. Under their feet, yesterday becomes foundation. Under your feet, their entire world becomes a buried archive. The open scholarly debate here concerns what surviving tablets can truly represent. Some researchers emphasize the richness of the written record, seeing it as an extraordinary window into administration, law, education, and literature. Others warn that tablets come mostly from particular institutions, periods, and accidents of preservation, leaving many communities underrepresented. Scholars at leading universities continue to ask not only what clay tells us, but what clay leaves out. That question follows you through the trench. A tablet discovered in a temple archive may reveal temple concerns. A school tablet reveals scribal training. A legal document reveals a dispute formal enough to be written. But what about the unwritten songs sung in fields? What about private grief? What about jokes never copied by students? What about people who never entered accounts except as labor categories? The mound contains them too, but not equally. Archaeology listens to silence as much as speech. At a museum, the tablet changes again. It leaves the heat and dust, entering a world of controlled light. Catalog numbers, storage trays, cameras, conservation tools, and scholars with careful eyes. Behind glass, it may look small, even disappointing to someone expecting treasure. No gold, no towering statue, just a lump of clay with marks. But that lump can be more revealing than gold. Gold says wealth existed. A tablet may tell you who moved it, who owed it, who feared losing it, who claimed authority over it, and how many workers received rations while someone more important praised the gods. Clay is less glamorous, but it talks more. You stand in a quiet museum gallery, The floor is polished, the light is gentle. Visitors pass slowly, some reading labels, some drifting toward larger objects, because humans remain easily seduced by size. In a case, a tablet rests at a slight angle. Its signs are tiny. Its surface looks dry and almost fragile, yet it may have survived flood, fire, conquest, abandonment, excavation, shipping, cataloging, and the occasional bored school group. That is resilience. The tablet seems calm under the glass, but it is not finished with the world. Scholars still photograph tablets using advanced imaging. Digital projects gather copies and transliterations. Museums identify fragments that may join other fragments. Students learn signs from tablets that once taught ancient students. An archive broken by war, neglect, or ancient collapse can slowly become readable again through comparison and care. Lost cities do not simply return. They are reconstructed patiently. A sign is checked against another sign. A broken edge is compared with a fragment in another collection. A tablet once considered dull becomes important when linked to a larger archive. A name appears in several documents. A family, workshop, institution, or local event begins to take shape. The past comes back not as a grand revelation, but as many small recognitions. You feel the pace slow, dust, clay, light, a sign. The ancient city does not rise complete before you. It appears in pieces like a dream remembered upon waking, a street line, a seal impression, a tablet about grain, a school exercise, a foundation deposit, a broken bowl, a doorway worn by feet. Each object is limited, but together they make a presence. Perhaps this is why the buried mounds feel slightly unsettling. They remind you that civilization can become landscape, a place of noise, heat, hunger, ambition, teaching, prayer, and complaint can become a hill where wind moves through grass. The city that invented stronger memory could not prevent its own forgetting. Its tablets survived, but its living voice faded. And yet, not entirely. When the tablet is lifted, when the signs are read, when the archive is studied, the silence changes texture. The city does not awaken fully. It murmurs. It gives back lists, names, myths, school mistakes, legal worries, and the endless human need to make life accountable. Under museum light or desert sun, clay continues its old work. It remembers enough to trouble the darkness. Your thoughts settle into a quieter question, older than any tablet and larger than any city. Why does writing change humanity so deeply? Not only because it stores words, not only because it helps officials count sheep with impressive seriousness. Writing changes the shape of memory itself. It gives thought a second place to live. You sit beneath a darkening sky near the edge of a canal. The water carries faint reflections of stars, broken by insects and drifting reeds. Somewhere behind you, a tablet dries in a room. Somewhere ahead, a child repeats a sign under a teacher's eye. Around you, people speak, laugh, bargain, complain, pray, and call across doorways. Their words rise into the evening and disappear. Speech is alive because it vanishes. Writing is powerful because it refuses. That refusal feels simple at first. A mark remains after the speaker has gone. A record can be checked the next morning. A contract can be remembered by people who were not present when hands were clasped. A hymn can be copied when the singer is dead. A king's name can survive the collapse of his walls. This is the visible miracle. Yet beneath it lies something more unsettling. Writing allows the past to become an object. You can hold it. You can carry it. You can store yesterday in a basket. You can place a dead command beside fresh bread. You can reopen a dispute, not by asking witnesses, but by turning a tablet toward the light. Memory no longer floats only inside living minds. It becomes part of the material world, resting beside jars, tools, doors, and bones. Mainstream research from institutions such as Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago has often emphasized that writing transformed administration, law, education, literature, and historical consciousness in Mesopotamia. The fact stands with quiet force. Once knowledge can be stored outside the body, society can accumulate complexity in new ways. Archives can grow. Traditions can be compared. Authority can reach across time. You feel that reach in the cool air. A tablet written years earlier can still influence a ration, a field claim, a debt, or a ritual. A school text copied by one student can shape another student's mind generations later. A myth set down in one city can move through other cities, other languages, and other centuries. Writing lets memory travel without the original speaker. It creates a strange companionship between the absent and the living. There is beauty in this. There is danger, too. The quirky tidbit is that some Mesopotamian scholars treated ancient inscriptions as treasures of knowledge from a revered past, copying older texts with intense care, and sometimes misunderstanding them with equal confidence. This is wonderfully human. People have always looked backward, found difficult old writing, and decided it must be profoundly important. Sometimes it was. Sometimes the old scribe may simply have had terrible handwriting and a long list of goats. Still, reverence for old writing reveals something important. Once written words survive long enough, they gain authority simply by being old. A tablet from the past can become more than information. It becomes a witness. It carries the aura of ancestors, kings, gods, teachers, and institutions. People do not merely read it, they inherit it. That inheritance reshapes identity. A community with written records can tell itself that it has a past with names, dates, rulers, offerings, disasters, and divine decisions. It can organize memory into lines and lists. It can argue over what happened. It can preserve one version and forget another. Writing does not end disagreement. It gives disagreement evidence to fight over, which is progress of a very human kind. You imagine two people disputing a boundary. One points to the field, the other points to the tablet. The field is visible, but the tablet claims memory. Which is stronger? The answer depends on law, power, witnesses, seals, and who knows how to read. Writing does not merely preserve truth, it participates in making truth official. That is a solemn power. The open scholarly debate concerns whether writing should be seen primarily as a tool of control or as a broader technology of cultural memory. Some historians emphasize its role in administration, taxation, labor organization, and elite power. Others stress its creative expansion into literature, science, law, learning, and religious imagination. Researchers at major universities continue to hold both sides in tension, because the tablets themselves do both things at once. They count workers, they preserve gods, they record debts, They carry songs. This dual nature's why writing feels so difficult to judge. It can protect the weak through contracts and records. It can also bind them to obligations they cannot escape. It can preserve a lament for a destroyed city. It can also help organize the labor that builds a ruler's ambition. It can make wisdom durable. It can make bureaucracy immortal, which may be either a blessing or a cosmic prank. You sit with that thought as night deepens. The canal water makes a soft clicking sound against reeds. A faint wind brings the scent of mud, smoke, and crushed herbs from nearby houses. The sky is wide, filled with stars that ancient people watched without needing charts to feel small beneath them. Human life is brief under such a sky. A voice lasts only a breath. A generation passes quickly. Even cities, massive and confident, eventually sag back into earth. Writing answers that fragility. It does not defeat death. It negotiates with it. A person dies, but a name may remain. A teacher dies, but an exercise survives. A city falls, but its lament can be copied. A god's hymn can sleep under dust, then wake in another age. A joke from a classroom can cross 4,000 years and still feel faintly mischievous. Writing gives human beings a way to send pieces of themselves forward, even when they cannot control who will receive them. That lack of control matters. The ancient scribe does not choose you. He writes for his institution, his teacher, his ruler, his god, his client, or his own training. Yet you become a later witness. You meet him through accident. His tablet survives because clay hardens, because a building collapses, because someone excavates, because a museum stores, because a scholar reads. The path from his hand to your mind is fragile and improbable. That makes the survival feel almost intimate. You begin to understand writing not merely as invention, but as a change in human time. Oral memory flows through presence, performance, and repetition. Written memory can pause, it can wait, it can remain unchanged while the world changes around it. A tablet can be silent for centuries, then speak suddenly to someone who belongs to another language, another body, another night. This waiting quality is mysterious. It means that writing creates delayed encounters. A thought does not need to be received when it is made. It can miss its first audience, lose its second, survive its third, and find a listener in a world its maker could not imagine. That is not ordinary communication. That is time folded into matter. Perhaps this is why the earliest writing carries such emotional weight, even when it is only administrative. The first records announce that humans have begun separating memory from breath. The world will never be quite the same. From this point, civilization can build archives, laws, schools, histories, libraries, scriptures, contracts, letters, and poems. It can also build surveillance, debt, propaganda, and paperwork with heroic persistence. The tablet gives no moral answer. It simply remains. In the late quiet, you picture a small piece of clay resting in darkness. Its signs are shallow, but sufficient. It contains numbers, names, or perhaps a line of myth. It does not know whether it serves control, memory, devotion, or curiosity. It only holds the pressure given to it. Yet that pressure is enough to extend a human moment beyond its natural life. Perhaps writing is humanity's first great refusal to disappear completely. Not a victory over time, but a gentle resistance. a way of saying that a thought, once formed, need not die when the mouth closes, and somewhere in the darkness, the clay keeps that promise with terrifying patience. The clay lies still beneath glass, but it does not feel finished. Around it, the museum room is hushed, polished, and carefully lit. The tablet is small enough to be missed by someone seeking crowns, gold, or statues, yet its surface carries the oldest kind of human defiance, marks pressed into earth, meaning held against time, a voice without breath. You stand close, looking down. The signs are tiny and patient. Some are understood, some remain uncertain. Some tablets in collections have never been fully studied, translated, or placed within their wider archive. Many more are broken, scattered, or hidden in storerooms, waiting for specialists with time, funding, eyesight, patience, and a tolerance for ancient accounting that borders on heroic. The past is not silent because it has nothing left to say. Often, it is silent because nobody has yet read the shelf. Mainstream research from major institutions such as Oxford, Yale, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania confirms that vast numbers of cuneiform tablets survive across museums and collections worldwide. These tablets preserve administration, law, schooling, letters, ritual, science, medicine, mathematics, hymns, and myth. The fact is astonishing. The ancient Sumerian invention did not end with Sumer. It opened a written tradition that endured for millennia across many peoples and languages. You let that settle gently. A single writing system, Aira, born from clay and reed, became one of history's longest conversations. It moved from Sumerian into Akkadian, then into wider scribal worlds. It served merchants, judges, priests, kings, students, astronomers, healers, and scholars. It recorded ordinary supplies and celestial observations. It held both donkey purchases and divine laments, which is a range modern civilization should perhaps respect. The quirky tidbit is that some tablets preserve complaints, legal quarrels, and remarkably familiar human irritations. People argued about deliveries, property, debts, adoption, marriage agreements, bad work, and broken promises. Ancient writing does not reveal humanity becoming noble and serene. It reveals humanity becoming documented. The first great miracle of literacy includes the permanent survival of irritation. Honestly, that sounds accurate. Yet beside those practical voices, something larger waits. You imagine unopened boxes in storage rooms, shelves lined with tablets wrapped in paper, labeled by excavation number, site, period, or collection. A broken corner may join another fragment far away. A dull record may complete the chronology of a family. A school tablet may reveal how a sign was taught. A neglected piece may contain a variant of a myth, a lost name, a local official, or a phrase no one has read for thousands of years. History is still being assembled. The open scholarly debate now reaches toward the future of the field itself. Some researchers emphasize digital imaging, databases, and collaborative projects as ways to unlock unread tablets more quickly. Others warn that context, language training, excavation history, and careful philology cannot be rushed. Leading scholars continue to balance technology with slow expertise, because ancient clay can be photographed in seconds, but understood only through years of learning. This is strangely comforting. The tablets still require human patience. They refuse to become simple data. Their marks must be compared, weighed, interpreted, doubted, and sometimes left unresolved. Even under modern light, they keep some of their ancient privacy. They remind you that knowledge is not the same as possession. A museum may own the object. Understanding must still be earned. You look again at the tablet's surface. The signs seem like small shadows caught in baked earth. They were made by someone who could not imagine your world. No electric light, no aircraft overhead, no printed books, no glowing screens full of messages written by hands that never touch clay. Yet the distance between you and that scribe is not total. You both live inside the same strange human wish to make thought last. Outside the museum, the modern city moves with engines, voices, glass, metal, and endless messages. Words travel faster than wind now. They cross oceans in less time than a reed stylus takes to press one sign. They multiply until memory feels not scarce, but overflowing. Still, the problem remains ancient. What should be kept? What will be forgotten? Which marks will survive the collapse of their own world? The Sumerian tablets ask this without speaking. They also warn you gently. Writing preserve, but never completely. It saves fragments, not whole lives. It keeps names, but not faces. It keeps accounts, but not every hunger. It keeps myths, but not the original night when a story first held listeners still. Even the strongest record is partial. The clay survives, but the living world around it becomes mist. That is why the mystery remains open. Who invented writing before the rest of the world? The answer points strongly toward Sumer, toward Uruk, toward the ancient administrative imagination of southern Mesopotamia. Yet invention is not a single flash. It is pressure, need, habit, experiment, training, revision, and survival. It is a city needing memory. It is a reed cut from marsh plants. It is a hand pressing signs into clay because someone must remember what the mind alone cannot safely hold. The museum grows quieter. A guard walks past with soft steps. A visitor leans toward the case, reads a label, then moves on. The tablet remains. It does not resent being overlooked. It has survived too much for vanity. It has endured heat, burial, ruin, discovery, classification, and modern curiosity. It waits with the old patience of earth. Perhaps somewhere inside its marks lies only a ration list. Perhaps it records wool, barley, oil, or labor. Perhaps it names a person whose family vanished before the first alphabet spread widely across the world. Perhaps it contains nothing dramatic at all. But that is the point. Writing did not need drama to change humanity. It needed repetition. It needed trust. It needed fear of forgetting. And it needed clay. You imagine the marshes again, dark and breathing under stars. Reeds bend in a slow wind. A worker carries a basket home. A scribe rinses his fingers. A tablet dries near a wall, still soft enough to smell of river mud. No one nearby knows that the future has begun watching. No one knows that distant people will one day ask who first gave memory a body. The answer rests partly there, in wet earth, in a city's need, in hands that disappeared. Now the sounds begin to soften. The museum fades. The glass case becomes only a faint reflection. The small tablet returns to darkness in your mind, resting as it rested for centuries, quiet beneath dust and fallen brick. There's no need to force the mystery closed. Ancient history rarely offers a final door. It gives you a threshold, a dim room, a few marks, and the feeling that something human has just passed nearby. So you breathe slowly. The first writers are gone, but their pressure remains. Their world has fallen, but its clay still speaks in fragments. Their names are mostly lost, but their invention surrounds you every time thought becomes visible. The night grows wide around that knowledge, gentle and deep, like a plain beneath stars. Perhaps the earliest sign was not only an account. Perhaps it was a promise that what passes through the human mind does not always have to vanish at once. A promise that grain, labor, gods, grief, jokes, debts, kings, children, and forgotten hands might leave some trace behind. Not the whole truth, never the whole truth, only enough to call you closer. The tablet sleeps now in its quiet case. The rivers move in memory. The reed bends again, and perhaps, somewhere among unread tablets and broken signs, the story of writing is not yet complete. Let the old city grow distant now. Let the storerooms darken, the schoolroom fall quiet, the temple courtyard empty beneath the cooling sky. Let the tablets rest where they are, safe in dust, shelves, cabinets, and dreams. You do not need to solve every sign tonight. You do not need to know every name, every number, every lost voice hidden in the clay. It is enough to have walked beside them for a while. The rivers of Sumer move slowly through the mind. Brown water under moonlight, reeds whispering at the banks, a small lamp trembling beside a scribe's hand, the smell of wet earth, the soft press of a reed point. The pause before meaning becomes permanent. Now the city lowers its voice. The workers have gone home. The animals are still. The tablets cool in the night air. Above the plain, the stars return to their ancient places, patient and remote, watching over ruins, museums, and sleeping listeners alike. You can leave the mystery open. You can let the unanswered question become part of the quiet. Somewhere, a clay mark waits. Somewhere, a name remains. Somewhere, the first memory has not finished speaking. And as your thoughts grow softer, the old world does not disappear. It simply settles beneath the surface, like a tablet under sand, waiting without hurry, holding its small darkness gently, until another dawn, another hand, another curious mind comes near. End of script. Good night.